Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Dukakis Center Live. This is a very special edition of Dukakis Center Live. I'm your host, David Wisner, Professor of International Relations at ACT, the American College of Thessaloniki, and also the Executive Director of the Michael and Kitty Dukakis Center for Public and Humanitarian Service. This evening and again tomorrow evening, we're hosting our annual Civil Society Forum. It's the fourth edition of this Civil Society Forum. And this evening show in particular is a reunion of some people that have been trying to get on air for quite some time. Beth Novak, now at Northeastern University, will be joining us from her office in Boston. And Effie Stefopoulou from the Hellenic Ministry of Public Administration will be joining us live from Athens. And I have a lot to ask you, and we have a limited amount of time, so I think I'll launch in. There will be further particulars as we go along. Beth, I want to get warmed up a little bit here. How does one develop an interest in skills and training in the public sector? I can't imagine a less sexy kind of thing to be working on.
Well, thank you very much, David. It's a pleasure to be here, and given all that's going on in the world, for a professor of international relations to take time out now to talk about this unsexy subject, I really greatly appreciate. But whereas we have a great crisis looming in front of us at the moment, in the long run, I think we do need to focus on building up the capacity of the public sector to be able to solve problems. So look, there's a lot of conversation in the news on a daily basis about the concept of upskilling for the private sector. There isn't a day that goes by when you don't read a headline in Forbes or the Harvard Business Review or the Financial Times about the need to prepare workers for the 21st century oncoming onslaught of the robots. So there's lots of headlines about how the robots will eat our jobs and how technology is changing work and the ways in which big data and machine learning and artificial intelligence are transforming jobs, or just how COVID has changed work and the need now to work from home and related questions. We're very silent, though, and when I say we, I'm talking across much of the world's governments and much public sector entities about the question of how do we prepare people who work for the public sector, which in many countries is the largest percentage of employees, for this new technology. So it's not just a private sector question. We have got to address how governments are going to be able to use data to do things in a more evidence-based way, as we saw during COVID. You know, you need to know where the virus is spreading. That means you have to know something about data. And you want to be able to deliver an effective service to people the way they expect from ordering a pizza online or buying a book on Amazon. You know, we need to be able to know, how do we deliver services using the internet? And how do we actually, as companies regularly do, engage with residents to ask them about the services they want, how to design them better, et cetera. So I won't go on for too long, but I agree with the premise of the question, which is we have got to figure out how to make this, if not a sexy topic, then at least a more compelling topic that we focus on. So I'm glad you're taking that time today.
Okay, and you say it's urgent, but you're also quite focused on a specific profile, it seems to me, what the public servant of the future will look like. It's someone who has been trained to solve problems effectively. Can you explain what you mean by that? Because that is a mouthful.
Well, I think that all of us, regardless of your political leanings, whether you're left or right or squarely in the center, wants government to work. We want our children to go to schools that deliver a high quality education. We want to be able to go to a hospital and receive life-saving care and life-prolonging care and life-improving care. We would like to sustain, hopefully, this planet of ours for a little longer and stave off the effects of climate change. So we have a lot of problems ahead of us, not to mention, depending on our culture, you know, significant and grave challenges with racial inequality and inequity, whether it's with regard to native-born populations or immigrant populations. and worldwide, a global challenge of income inequality that's only widening across most countries. So the problems part, I think, is pretty straightforward. We got a lot of problems to fix. And you can turn on today's news and we've got even more problems today than we had yesterday. So we want government to work. Now, we may disagree politically about the nature of those problems, which problems to tackle first, or even how we should solve them. But in the 21st century, I think we have such advances of science and technology, so many new inventions that could allow us to do things better in terms of achieving these simple goals of taking out the trash and reducing traffic, that I think we need to do more to ensure that we're working in more modern ways to deliver those solutions to people and improve the average person's life.
It would seem to me that there's a question of perception here, because when we think of public servants, sometimes we think of clerks from Victorian England, and you're talking about a person who's really quite different from that. So it would strike me there seems to be a need to educate the general public what public servants do, what their place is in society, that potentially they're actually able to help. We're not in a Ronald Reagan moment here, suggesting that we are going to flee the moment a public servant walks in. Are we not? You call them 21st century public servants. Let me move ahead to your profile. You have been appointed the Chief Innovation Officer in the state of New Jersey. In an article you published last year in Democracy, you list a series of policy recommendations for the Biden administration. You have some experience having worked in the Obama administration previously. What likelihood is there that there's an appetite to enact the sorts of changes that you're recommending?
So let's look globally for a moment. And I would say there's a lot of precedent elsewhere in the world for the kinds of changes I'm talking about. And in terms of specific policy recommendations, the simple idea that a public sector employer, and remember that the public sector, back to your earlier question, also includes your doctor, your teacher, your bus driver, as well as the person sitting behind the desk at the motor vehicle department handing you a driver's license, or what we think of as the bureaucrat, the sort of faceless person making policy in Athens or Brussels or London or elsewhere, or the legislator who, sits in a parliament and determines the budgets that will be spent on public sector services, or that decide on legislation, as well as then the less well-known people who work in administrative agencies, who then take that legislation and turn it into specific regulations that determine things like the quality of your air, the quality of your water, or how wide the doorway should be to ensure that a wheelchair can go through it. Or as our Congress did in the US last year, issued new guidance, but this is a true fact, on ceiling fans. So not even an administrative agency, Congress, of the few things that it did last year, decided to enact legislation on ceiling fans last year. So bureaucrats do a very, very wide range of things. So that's back to your first point. But very concretely, the challenge is that we're not training people to in any of the new tools that are available, let alone the new ways of working that companies have come to understand are fairly standard modes of operating. In other words, going out to your customers and talking to them about the services that they want. It's something companies regularly do, using data to better determine how you deliver those services. Again, if you look at the top 25 public policy schools in the United States, according to a study by researchers at Cornell, excuse me, none of them require training for future public servants in data science. We're not requiring people to learn how to engage with residents. So very concretely, Germany offers free training in what they call, in English, New Work, on their new platform they launched this past year in May, not even a year ago, on their new training platform. Canada has created a new digital and innovation skills training program for the whole of the public sector, where they offer what they call bus rides. That is to say, little lessons in new ways of working, short enough for you to listen on your bus ride on your way to work. or now that you can't get to work in Ottawa, perhaps you're listening from home. But the short idea is that you can listen to something very quickly and learn some new ways of working. In Singapore, there is a whole of government training strategy in which they have declared, we think in the 21st century, all public servants need to know about technology. And they are training the whole of government, again, at no cost, and making it not only available to people, but creative incentives for people to learn. So in Argentina, your salary and your promotion is tied to how you get trained. And if you don't get trained, you don't get promoted and you don't get advancements in salary. So there are other governments outside of the United States are looking at this issue of how do we ensure that public servants can do a better job of delivering services and making policies and solving problems by giving people new tools. We're not expected to know these automatically. We do have to learn how to do them.
Okay, so actually you helped me segue into the first question that I wanted to ask Effie, and that was quite efficient. I didn't have to really poke you too much to do that, but there is an international dimension, as you're suggesting, and there are lots of places that the professionals in the United States can turn outside of the United States to see how it's done, how one might be more efficient and effective in training public servants for the 21st century. So let me turn to Effie Stefopoulou, who is joining us once again from Athens, where she is at the Ministry of Public Administration. You have worked for many years on a variety of reform projects, and I am been here long enough to know that the average public servant in Greece does not have a very good reputation, and public servants are often maligned. You came to Thessaloniki in 2012, and you suggested that there are pockets of public servants who are interested in being more innovative, taking initiatives, that may be correcting this one-sided view we have of public servants. What snapshot can you give of the public sector in Greece today? Effie Stefopoulou.
Hello, Dan. Nice to be here with you today. Okay, I think that public service, especially in Greece at least, it's quite heavily discredited because we needed a scapegoat to put all the blame on it for the crisis we had been through during the past decade. I think that the public service in Greece, as in elsewhere, in other countries, is as good as the whole set of employees all around, even in the private sector or the public sector. The quality is the same. There are niches of quality everywhere, as there are bad apples everywhere. What we have to do, I think, if we want to succeed in reforms, is to seek for these pockets of quality and bring them up, make them an example, and challenge the preconceptions that there exist about civil service and public employees. Because this stereotype of the middle-aged man, pen-pushing, bored, doing nothing interesting, quite unsexy, it may be the case, but it is not always the case. And as time goes by, that changes a lot. Nowadays, we have civil servants that are very well qualified, academically speaking. They are very well trained, and they have experiences from other sectors before joining the public service. They have experience from the private sector and companies, etc. And what we tend to do is just suppress them under the political dominance of the civil service and the public administration in Greece. You know very well that in Greece, there is a political dominance over the administrative system, and all these qualities do not find the place and the room and the air to breathe and the soil to flourish. So it's not just that we don't train them. Okay, we can go to that. There is severe lack of adequate training, but even the qualities that they are already there, they are already in the civil service, we don't exploit them to the best. We don't value them, and we keep on discrediting them. So I think that there is a whole culture in there. It's not just making some reforms, which is not reforms. If you make something at a point, you just make a small change here and a small change there, it's not a reform. You have to think systematically. You have to think the whole picture and how you involve civil servants in the rulemaking process. That's where I began my career from, in the rulemaking process, and that's why I fell in love with the data, because nobody at the moment back almost 20 years ago was using data to deliver rules. And having studied physics as my first degree, I was very much aware that whenever you don't have data, you don't get results, you don't solve the equations. So civil sector in Greece, as in elsewhere, as in many other countries, is the employer who has the most data collected in one place. How do we come not using them? And nowadays, we have some niches of civil servants that can use them, and we must take the best advantage of them to make it spread all around the public service, I suppose.
Let me turn to another question here, because we've been, when you look at the United States, you can focus on state and local government, and then you look at the federal government, and a lot of what Beth has been looking at has to do with the federal government, but she's also there working in the state of New Jersey. To what extent are we looking at a pan-European environment with regard to the public sector and training and skills of public sector employees, Effie?
I think we are quite far away from that, but not that far away. There are projects. For example, there is a set of projects called the twinning projects, which bring together different administrations from different countries, between EU countries. And what's more interesting for me, and that was one of the most interesting experiences in my career, is when I worked in a couple of such projects with countries that are now or were at the time applying to enter the EU. So you come together, you bring together civil servants from both administrations, you put them work together, they exchange experiences, and it's not just a visit, it's not that. You go there for a year, for 2 years, you work with the people, you learn from them as well as they learn from you. And I think if we enhance this sort of projects, we are quite not close, but we are in a good pathway to achieving a common conception, at least, of what the European Union does in terms of the civil service that serves the public administration all over the countries of the European Union. It's difficult, but it's also so exciting, so amazing to exchange all this. It's not just the techniques of the work. It's just the culture. It's also the culture. It's the richness of the civilization you got in touch with when you work with different organizations. And it's one thing to visit to visit a place. It's another thing to work with people, and especially the hard core of a country, which is its public administration. You see so many things, and you can bring back to your country that much value that cannot be compared to any behind the desk training set, for example. I think we are on a path to that way. We need much more effort to achieve that, and it's a richness there. There is some treasure in there hidden yet.
And I'm perhaps guilty of this. When foreigners come to Greece, we tend to look down our noses at the Greeks. We have a paternalistic opinion or approach to dealing. We'll teach you how to have a functioning political economy or a public administration. And you have said in my presence in events that the record is really quite different, that there are a lot of things that outsiders can learn from the Greek experience. And I wonder, because we're here sharing ideas with our colleague Beth Novak from the United States, what are one or two things that you might want to point out that, I think that this is a case study in how we can modernize and make more effective the public sector?
I think there is no learning process that goes one way. All learning processes go both ways, and that's what makes them interesting. Otherwise, no teacher is a good teacher if it goes that just to teach, to nod his head and point fingers at bad things and make a nice PowerPoint presentation with the top 5 bullets to do how to time manage perfectly, for example. No, there is no such thing. It's boring, at least. It's not learning. Learning goes both ways. And I think, for example, and looking back at the Greek regulatory history, which I feel more comfortable talking about, let me give you an example. There was the first civil code of the Greek state. It was not yet a Greek state. It was the island of Samos. They had developed a civil code, let's say, arranged marriages, divorces not that much at the time, but adoption, children, the civil code. And that civil code back in the 19th century was so modern compared to what existed at the time. It was the first time in Europe, in the Greek island of Samos, that the child was not considered a property of his father. It was a separate being. And that was a very innovative idea at the time. And things like that, you can point out in every country, not only in Greece, for example, I remember that example, but if at the present time we see that kind of things, we can exchange and learn from each other. It's not something that you must go on making someone do something. You cannot make someone be kind. You cannot order someone be empathetic. You cannot do such things. You can exchange, you can learn, and you can inspire people, not impose learning on anyone.
Yeah. Let me try to have you exchange views together here. I'm asking first Beth if there's something she hears in Effie's comments that is representative in some way of what she hears elsewhere, and point out that you had experience working with colleagues in Germany not too long ago. You yourself have just mentioned cases in Canada and Singapore also. But when you perhaps you're not familiar with the Greek case, this is a rather interesting one to study. What rings in your ears as you listen to Effie share her experience here in Greece?
So a number of useful reflections here, starting with the last point, that learning is not something that can be imposed, but has to be really learned through exchanges of stories and experiences, as I think you're suggesting. Let me point to actually a Greek example that I love and that in fact, I just used it this morning in a coaching program that I did with social innovators around the world. Is I often talk a project out of Athens called the Synathina Project, that may or may not be familiar to people. I'd be curious your reflections from there. But the Synathina Project is one that has existed now since I think 2013. It has survived transitions of leadership in Athens, transitions of political party, and it is one of the best examples from my perspective from anywhere in the world of a government actually co-creating solutions to urban challenges with residents. So when we talk about this new skill, and I think it is a skill of learning how to work with communities to solve problems, we have to learn by doing. And I think that's Effie's point here. It's not something you can just go into a classroom and somebody gives you a lecture and says, follow this formula. We have to learn through those kinds of knowledge exchanges that you were talking about. So I 100% agree that it's not as simple as exclusively sort of having some classes. The kinds of exchanges that you're talking about, whether it's between public sector institutions or between public and private sector, a number of governments are now adopting fellowship programs where you can go into government for a year or for 2 years rather than forever. You go in and you do a presidential innovation fellowship in Mexico, for example, is a thing that they have created, or you do a presidential innovation fellowship in the United States. Or you do a fellowship in state or local government. Again, there are a number of these. Scotland and England both have government exchange programs. So I think those kinds of shared learnings are wonderful. And I can imagine just the idea of having more people learn from an example like Synathina, where the city has 450 different civil society groups organizing different initiatives around the city that are then helping to improve the quality of life in Athens in recent years. And so an example like that is then copied by a place like Lakewood, Colorado, a community of 150,000 people, where in turn they have learned from Athens to go out and work with 20,000 residents on creating 500 different sustainability and environmental programs. So again, the skills that it takes, whether it's to use data or to use community wisdom and community action, are not things that are innate. We don't know how to do them automatically, especially given the limited number of hours in the day and the number of things that a public servant has to work on. So that kind of shared learning, those sorts of exchanges that you talked about, are extraordinarily important. Last quick point here, back to your first point, which is the bad reputation of public servants. And David, you were touching on this before. You know, it's not sexy. It's not sexy. The word bureaucrat by itself, you know, you just think Victorian, you know, clerk sitting in some office, or you think about a Kafka story and you imagine endless lines waiting to get your motor vehicle license, or whatever it may be. You know, we don't think, the word does not conjure up good things. So I think in Effie's point that we really have to rehabilitate the concept of the public servant. I think it was probably Russia, which is probably not a place I want to talk about today, but I believe it's where I was driving from the airport to my hotel, and they had full billboards on the road, wherever this was, that said, "Meet your public servant," and had a picture of a bus driver and had a picture of a school teacher, and sort of trying to rehabilitate this notion. There's an organization in the United States called the Partnership for Public Service, which supports, it's essentially a trade association for public servants. But one of the things that they've done in the last few years is to create an Academy Awards, an Oscar-style awards ceremony for public servants. And they get the most famous celebrities now. I mean, we're talking name famous movie actors to come to this awards ceremony. They're doing it online, which makes it much easier. And they give big prizes and awards to the scientist who works in government, who invents the COVID vaccine, or the astronaut who goes to space, or the, you know, think of something else that's sexy. You know, bureaucrats don't sound sexy. Astronauts are sexy. COVID vaccines and scientists, that's kind of sexy. People who are out there sort of delivering services to veterans, you know, telling those stories has to be part of this equation to rehabilitate and make people aware of just how much public servants actually do. And yes, there are bad apples and there are lazy apples in every profession. They get unfair attention, I think, in this space where, frankly, most public servants are really dedicated, passionate people just trying to do their job, frankly, under very, very difficult conditions. So all that to say, yes to exchanges, yes to storytelling, yes to actually celebrating what public servants do and making people aware that far from being, you know, pencil pushers, they are in fact astronauts and teachers and garbage men and all kinds of other things that really make our lives better.
Effie, I don't know if you want to add something to this, and then we'll start another round of discussion. Do you want to follow up in any way to what you're hearing from Beth Novak in Boston?
I couldn't agree more that every department in the public sector has a story. And what's amazing is that all these stories combined together create the mission of a country, create a mission of a homeland. And that's amazing. It's a very different thing from the mission, which is okay and it's always there in a private company. But I cannot imagine something more emotional and more important to create the mission of a country, combining stories of people and departments that seem so sexy, so sexless, not sexy at all. And at the end, they create something so interesting and big. I very much agree to that.
Okay, another round of questioning. I'll return to you, Beth, for just a moment here. You were discussing in this article and in our conversation just now the types of partnerships which one might forge within the civil society, within the public sector, excuse me, or in civil society, with business, with universities. I think the programs that you're involved with, both at New York University and at Northeastern University, are emblematic of that. And I'm curious, what sorts of what might be the role of a college like ACT or Northeastern University, again in Boston, where you have people like Michael Dukakis on the faculty and other very distinguished and capable people doing research, interacting, engaging in outreach. But what are the types of roles you see for universities in the training drift that you're proposing here?
I think there are really three things that matter here. Number one, we have to train students across all disciplines to focus on solving what I call public problems. In other words, there is a great appetite among young people today to be able to do well by doing good, to become mission-driven leaders and be able to take action in the world. So there's lots of survey data showing that young people want to go to work for an employer that shares their values, that is focused on doing good in the world, and where they have an opportunity again to do something that is public spirited and public minded. So we need to think about training a lot of students in these new ways of working and give them the expertise to be able to know how to tackle, real world challenges, whether it's, again, climate change or public health or economic inequality. Kids want to work on these issues. So we need to give them that opportunity, having nothing to do with government. And there are lots of new, innovative, educational, I think, institutions like a place called CRI in Paris, the Centre de Recherche International in Paris. There's a new place in Berlin called CODE. There's a new London interdisciplinary school. We're seeing a number of innovations in higher education, which are reorienting higher education around real world problem solving. And Northeastern is one of those places as well, where the university has put the solving of real world problems squarely at the center of its strategic plan and how it is defining the university's mission. The second thing is we need to inspire more people, though, to go into government. And you don't have to be in public administration. To Effie's point, she studied physics. And today, government, more than ever before, needs people who know science, who know engineering, who know data, who understand how to engage with residents. So we shouldn't only be training people or creating pathways into government for people who study public administration. We need to make students who study computer science and art aware of the opportunity to take a career in government and to explain what that means to people and why that's an exciting option. It used to be we kind of pitched people working in government. This is a steady, stable, lifelong job with tenure that you can go to work for forever. This generation isn't interested in forever. They're interested in doing something exciting where they can go to solve a real world problem. And we need to sell that better. Government is the place you can go to make a difference in the world. And so that's, I think, really sexy. And we're not doing a good enough job at selling that to students. And finally, when we do train people, knowing that the people going into government, especially, are going to come from a variety of fields, we need to train them in new ways of working. So we need to train people in data science. We need to train people in what some people call human-centered design, or we could just call working with residents or public engagement. We need to train people in how to do these things. What Effie was talking about in terms of exchanges and learning from other governments, I teach something to everybody that I teach, whether they're students or professionals, called fast field scanning. In other words, I teach a set of skills for how to go out there and find what else has worked in other places that you could borrow for yourself. You could just think of that as fast research. But that's something we can teach people how to do to make them better at doing their job, whether they're going into government or the private sector or the NGO sector. I think that there is an updating of the curriculum that we typically teach in public administration, but also that we should teach in other disciplines as well.
Okay. I'm going to steer the same question to you, Effie, bearing in mind that you teach at the National School for Public Administration. Are you thinking along these same lines as you're designing your courses and preparing your lectures? And to push it a little bit further, we like to think in Thessaloniki that Thessaloniki should be the Boston of the Balkans. As I say, you have very good public universities, you have some very good private institutions. There is now some growing entrepreneurial ecosystem in Thessaloniki. We've always aspired to be capital of the Balkans economically and diplomatically. Do you see the kinds of synergies that Beth is suggesting ought to be there, where you're teaching or where we are here in Thessaloniki? And a little caveat, because you and I have spoken about this in the past, and we had hopes to try to design a program that would take advantage of the expertise which exists with your institution, and also link to schools like Northeastern in Boston, and really create this kind of hub in Thessaloniki. But how do you approach the teaching angle with respect to your work?
Okay, good ideas come from everywhere. No one has a monopoly on good ideas or innovation. And the spirit that all of us, and us, I mean, people in the civil service have something, is that we have something to share and something to learn. And while teaching in the Greek National School of Public Administration, where the students there, all of them have a university degree, and 55% have a post-university degree. That means that their academical level is quite high. They already are open in cooperating with people and with institutions outside the public administration. Although there is a heavy inheritance in the Greek public administration that has made a bad name out of cooperations without the silos of the public administration, I think that younger generations that come into the public administration are more open to cooperation. And what I try, at least what I teach, to what my approach is, to find always the cracks where the light can come in from elsewhere. And even if we are the smartest person in a team, it is difficult to outsmart the entire team. That means that we can not only look at what the resources we have in our department are, we must look outward. You remember 10, 11 years ago, there was a peak in innovative approaches in public administration in Europe. I have in mind just the Nudge team in the UK and the design, the GovLab in Denmark, and ideas that bring the design in the administrative life in public administration. These ideas, some of them came from within, but most of them came not from outside public administration, but from the interaction of public administration people from public administration with people outside public administration, NGOs, the private sector, etc. So being open does not only bring new ideas on the table. Being open means that you understand the problems of the people better as well. And if you are here, you are in the government to solve problems, you have to be with people. You have to talk. You have to be with the academic research universities do in order to find better solutions. And better, I mean, more efficient, more economical, more human solutions to the problems we face today. And that's something that it has to be learned, because the inertia that comes along with being appointed somewhere as a civil servant, and the culture in the civil service, which is brought as a heavy burden on the shoulders of civil servants, is that, okay, look on your desk, look on your screen, and don't look very much left and right and outside your cubicle. So I think that people are willing to cooperate, but they need just a little push. They need to feel safe that it's okay to do that. And after they feel psychologically safe to go outside to cooperate, they really enjoy and they really bring results when doing it.
Excellent. Well, this is quite encouraging. I want to ask one last question of both of you. I represent the Dukakis Center for Public Service. And when I think of public service, I think of a quote by Alexis de Tocqueville in Democracy in America, The health of a democratic society, he writes, may be measured by the quality of functions performed by private citizens. And this is what I mean when I talk about public service at the Dukakis Center. So how do we square this idea of private citizens looking after the well-being of their fellow citizens and the professionals in the public administration, without which there's no real public service to speak of? Beth, how do you find any difficulty there? Are they complementary in a sense?
Absolutely. Look, I do hear the argument frequently that, we elect people in government to do certain jobs for us, and therefore, because we pay taxes, we should not have to do these things for ourselves. And I hear that argument from both sides. In other words, I hear it from citizens who say, look, I pay taxes. I want government to work and to function. And then I hear from both politicians and public servants, this is my job. Leave me to do my job. I don't want to be either hassled with that kind of, with having to deal with residents. It's just, creates opportunities for corruption. But I think given the number of challenges that we face as a society, given our desire to live, to Effie's point, in a world of human kindness where people are good to one another, given how much we already do at the community level to help our neighbors, and what we know about how it prolongs life and improves the quality of well-being and improves the strength of our democracy and our communities when citizens help one another, I think it's absolutely right that we need to focus on helping everyone who wants to be more engaged in their community to do so. That does not undermine the role of government in helping to organize and coordinate some of this. So what's fantastic, for example, about Sinatina is that they're just helping to coordinate and to support and to celebrate a lot of the work being done by neighbors for one another, essentially. And I think that support and that coordination is part of what I'm talking about when we refer to the 21st century public servant. It's not somebody who has to control everything themselves, but someone who can leverage the power of the crowd to do much more than government can do working alone. Okay. So I'll give you one quick example here. In the UK, there is a project by the name of Good Sam, SAM, which stands for Good Samaritan. We have a similar project in the United States called Pulse Point. And what Good Sam does is if you have, God forbid, a heart attack or an accident, Alexa, stop. There's the technology. If you have an accident, you normally call the emergency number and you wait for fire or police to come and help you. Minutes could go by, which reduces your opportunity of survival. Thanks to open data and your phone, there's my phone here, we can geolocate somebody who has CPR experience, who might be right next door, who might be down the block, a doctor sitting in a restaurant, or a nurse who's sitting on at the bus stop, or someone else who's been trained in CPR. And long story short, this can help them to come. Government coordinating the service helps to get people to come to your rescue. For every minute someone gets to you faster, it increases your life expectancy by 50%. Why would we not want to take advantage of that? We need government to coordinate it, but we need citizens to be involved in helping to improve people's lives in their own communities. And so that's why when we talk about this kind of training and upskilling, it's something that I think all of us need to take on in our communities, not just inside government, but outside, learning what we can do to become more mission-driven problem solvers.
Excellent. Excellent. Effie, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think they are great examples. Just brought to mind that the example of the Greek case of Diavia. Diavia was an initiative that took place 10 years ago, and it was just the simple decision to upload every government's decision. It might seem everyday business now, but 10 years ago it was not. So it was just the data there, but not just the data as PDF forms or something that was not readable by the machine. It was data readable by machine readable. And then civil society came in, and they used the APIs, the search engines, and all the techniques that the modern technology offers to us and softwares. And they created such a depth and such a great value of all this data. And you could see at least they created, for example, how can I say, we could check if there were possibilities of fraud. Civil organizations, public organizations became more accountable because there were someone running a software seeing if you were given the same contract over and over again to the same person with much higher value than the normal contract could be. This sort of openness and transparency was initiated from a government decision to upload all the decisions, but then it was enhanced by civil society. So I think that civil service is something we must decide what kind of civil service we prefer. We prefer a hierarchy of more small interest. Everyone does its own small job, or a democracy of high expectations. And I think that's where the combination of forces come in. If we want a democracy of high expectations, it has to be done with all of us together, not sector by sector.
Okay, great. Well, you know, this is it. It's a perfect plug for what we do at the Dukakis Center, and I'm extremely grateful to both of you. I want to say that we hosted Amalia Zeppu of Synathina in 2019 when we hosted our first civil society forum. And she was quite an impressive person, and working on behalf of the mayor, the municipality of Athens, I think, but also engaging all across the civil society spectrum in Athens and beyond. Before we take our leave, I just want to plug Beth Novak's most recent book, as she's mentioned it in passing during our discussion. It's entitled Solving Public Problems: How to Fix Our Government and Change Our World. And that appeared with Yale Press in 2021. We haven't yet received our copy, but we've ordered it for the Dukakis collection in the Bissell Library, and it'll occupy a place of pride in the collections here. So I want to take this opportunity to thank our guests from Boston and from Thessaloniki, Beth Novak at Northeastern University. And if you know anything about ACT, you know that we have an extremely healthy and robust relationship, a study abroad relationship principally with Northeastern University. And of course, our namesake, Michael Dukakis, has been teaching for decades now at Northeastern also. And I don't know, you probably see him more often than I do, but I understand he still walks to work. He does his office hour. He's really an active guy. Effie Stefopoulou, an old friend, this is her third time appearing with us at the Dukakis Center, and I so look forward to being able to see you face to face, maybe in our next trip to Athens, once all of the fear that surrounds COVID and the national lockdown are things of the past. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I will continue now to the next part of the program. So our guests are going to leave the studio, and I thank them once again. We'll take a brief pause here while we set up the studio for the next panel. This will be some regional practitioners in the public sector and in civil society, and they have a rather unique relationship with the city of Thessaloniki. You know, we dubbed this program the Thessaloniki Civil Society Forum. All of them and all of the speakers who will appear subsequently studied at ACT, did their undergraduate college degrees at the American College of Thessaloniki. Most, if not all of them, came to us from abroad, from throughout Southeast Europe, students from Cyprus, students from the United States. It's something we're very proud of. It's something that ACT wants to contribute to the local mix, as we were just suggesting with Beth Novak, such that Thessaloniki will one day be recognized as the Boston of the Balkans, or maybe one day people will speak of Boston as the Thessaloniki of New England. That would be an even better aspiration. So as we set up the studio, I'll call my next guests in, and we'll proceed with a discussion of how the sorts of problems and approaches to solving problems we just heard about from Beth Novak and Effie Stefopoulou are actually being put into practice throughout the public sector. So our first guest will be Ermal Vila, who comes to us. He's joining us from Washington, D.C., where he's a governance specialist at the World Bank, graduated in 2011. We have in the studio Nemanja Grgic, student from Serbia, who is the Technical Cooperation Manager in Agribusiness at the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. And I might mention that both Ermal and Nemanja did their master's degrees at Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies, and we're quite proud of their success there. And finally, adding to the mix today is Marinella Cerepi, if I say it right, Cerepi. Marinella is the baby of the group, if you'll permit me for saying it. She graduated in 2016. She's a management assistant at the European Parliament, which is quite an accomplishment. And I presume that you're joining us from your office in Brussels. All right, as you listened to the discussion previously, what is your general impression? Ermal, you work in a lot of training projects in your capacity as a governance expert at the World Bank. You know, what are the 1 or 2 or 3 points that you want to pick up on and say, yes, this is really where it's at. This is how we're approaching things in my line of work also. Bearing in mind that this is an international public organization that you're working at. You're muted. Sorry, you got to turn your mic on.
All right, is it better?
Yes.
All right, so thanks, Dr. Wisner, and it's actually quite a pleasure to be here. And I listened carefully to parts of the conversation, and I read Beth's article, and it's in a way the bread and butter of what I do here at the World Bank, working on human resource management and the transformation of the public sector has been going through for the past decade, and especially in the past 5 years. Most of that focus has been around digital transformation. And a big part of that is kind of this digital skills training of public servants and civil servants. Technology has evolved quite rapidly, and especially in the past 2 years in terms of how the public service or how the governments have been providing their services through, by using online tools. But unfortunately, the public sector employees have not caught up to that, and a big part of the components of our work is related especially to that. Civil servants who've been in the business for decades, they've had a bit of a hard time in a way adjusting to the new technologies, and so what we do is that we bring kind of curricula from different more advanced, let's say, kind of public sector institutions and apply them into different contexts that we work on. I work mostly in Eastern Europe and the Western Balkans. And it's been interesting to see how the public sector, with all its faults and its challenges, in many ways has progressed quite significantly when it comes to adapting to the times and being more efficient in terms of providing their services to citizens. And then it was also very interesting to note, and also from her article, from Beth's article, that it's a bit shocking in a way to see how the U.S. itself and the U.S. public sector sometimes lacks in bringing together these innovative tools that Beth talks about. And I've had both experiences being in the States. I've worked with the Congressional Budget Office, and their tools of doing forecasting and budget analysis are just top notch, and we use them and their skills training for trainings all over the world. And then you go to the DMV in DC, and I had to go 3 times, I think, the last time, because it's still kind of paperwork based. And in countries that we work on, in my own country in Albania, a lot of that it's basically done online now, and that was very interesting to note. But I'm going to stop here.
Greece too, and it's a shock.
Yeah, it's a shock. But yeah, that's kind of just my first thoughts, and then maybe later down the conversation, I can maybe explore a little bit more on what the skills mean for kind of the younger generation of public servant aspirants.
Let me turn to Nemanja. And Nemanja, you were educated kind of a classic liberal arts education, a solid postgraduate education for practitioners. You worked in civil society for a while, and now you're an expert in agribusiness at a bank, a development bank. So, one thinks skills and training, part of that has to be academic, but part of that has to be, these additional things that everyone's learning how to do, such as, do online banking if you're a simple citizen. How does your experience reflect the larger question of where we learn what to do, particularly if you're in the public sector?
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you, Dr. Wisner, and yes, very happy to be here. I mean, it's an interesting question. I think happy to kind of talk about my own experience and sort of as you said, with more of a generalist, let's say, education. How do you sort of end up in a more sort of specific role, working in a specific area, right? And I would say that it really it's not that hard in a way. I think when it comes down to it, right, thinking about all of this sort of future of work, artificial intelligence, robots taking over, etc. I think it really, in a way, it even emphasizes maybe what are those kind of basic skills that we need in order to succeed. And that, even with COVID, even with all of these really kind of significant transformation that we're seeing, that some of these sort of really basic skills kind of remain as very, very necessary. So to me, I don't know, we can call them soft skills or whatever, but, the basic kind of, when it comes to communication, the writing, right, languages, I don't know, sort of the way we use and interpret data, creative thinking, etc. Those are the really kind of important things to be good at. And then I think it's something that, kind of maybe that is something that young people maybe don't think about enough, or we're too kind of young and inexperienced when we just come out of grad school to sort of understand. It's really important to kind of think about and understand what is it that you're really good at, right? And then the thing that you're good at, really kind of stick with that, right? Try to be the best at it. Try to be that kind of uniquely well, kind of formed expert in it, and that sells, let's say, that really, right, kind of succeeds.
So
again, kind of,
excuse me, Nemanja, I'll interrupt here. You're giving advice that a manager in a big corporation might give his employees. There isn't that much difference, is there?
Yeah, but I mean, again, it's
your
really,
your special skills and talents and develop them.
Yeah. It's really kind of thinking about what is that niche, let's say, the sort of, thinking about your team, your organization. There's going to be some part of that work that's not being done. Why is nobody picking it up, right? what happens if you do, if you try to really kind of become an expert in it, right? The person that other people go to, become the focal point. So I think, again, that's something that, you know, it's really hard to think about when you're kind of just out of grad school. You don't, you know, sort of, you don't really understand the world in a sense, but just kind of trying to focus on a few things like that, and then thinking about what will get me there, what are the skills, what is the knowledge, right? I think as Ermal touched upon it, and also the previous panel, obviously, as well, you know, with this digitalization of knowledge and kind of so much, you know, it's so much easier to transfer knowledge, to share, you know, it really kind of, there's huge possibilities there. So for me, you know, kind of finding that space for yourself, taking the time to do that is really key.
Okay. Marianela, I turn to you now. You're, well, I'm imagining that Ermal does some training of public sector experts and perhaps interacts with government personalities, but you're working with politicians pretty much all day long, if I'm not mistaken here. You know, is the view from within the European Parliament, where people are making decisions about policies and programs, different? I mean, would you approach the topic of skills and training a little bit differently from what you're hearing previously from our previous panel, or from our two guests, Ermal Vila and Nemanja Grgic?
So hello everyone, and thank you again for the invitation. I'm very glad being here, and indeed I'm from Brussels connecting, but from home, because we are mostly teleworking also. So I go like twice per week at the office. Me personally, I am a management assistant, and I work for the director for DG Finance, because the Secretariat of the Parliament, so I'm in the administration of Parliament. I don't work in a political group or in a party. I work for the administration, so we support the work of the politicians in the back offices. So I work for DG Finance, and indeed what I observe is what I listen also before in the discussion. It's we have similar kind of challenges, and honestly, because of the multicultural environment we are working with, and also the political influence, because we work for the politician, there needs to be some sort of balancing between following the rules, because we really have a lot of rules and regulations to follow, so the rigidity of the institution, and at the same time we are trying to adapt to a client-oriented approach, because the public institutions are turning towards that. We are talking more of public management than public administration, so it becomes more of a client-oriented approach towards even the politicians. I wouldn't like to call them like that, because they are not clients, of course, but our approach should be in that sense, in that regard, yes, similar.
In other words, as we say in the intelligence community, you want to craft a product, and your client needs a product to be able to work with. Is that how you look at it? You're importing a mentality from the private sector almost.
Yes, so of course, we receive requests, because the MEPs, the members of the European Parliament elected by the different member states, they of course have different allowances. Is it for their assistants? It's for their travel allowances, all sorts of economic support. So we might receive requests on covering their expenditure. And in that sense, we have to be, of course, always responsive. We have to look at the rules, but at the same time, trying to adapt to their needs, because everyone coming from all these different countries, they have different kinds of needs. And yes, in that sense, we really have to be responsive in a different way. And this is, as I said, this is sometimes difficult, because we have the rules, but it's always a case-by-case approach as well, according to the MEP's needs.
Ermal, if you think about what has been said so far, what haven't we said? What sorts of skills or training have we not yet brought to the attention of the viewers of this program? Data, there was a lot of emphasis on data. You'll recall that Beth Novak mentioned human design. she was talking about different ways of providing service. Is there something that we're missing in the discussion thus far, given your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, Beth probably touched upon most of the most important skills that are kind of required basically working with data and understanding data and using them, you know, in an effective way. We also have had a bit of a shift in terms of understanding what we call like climate skills. So understanding the import of, you know, the impact of climate change in the work that you do. And we have a new kind of a term called climate co-benefits. So basically, in most of the projects that we get involved, we look at how this ties up to providing or to how this ties up to, you know, climate change issues. And this kind of this climate co-benefits screening that we do looks at how a specific project, which you think is not you know, directly linked to, you know, climate change, can be, you know, can be used and applied. I'll give you an example. For example, you know, when we look at, you know, down the line how, you know, climate change is going to impact the environment, there is some communities will be impacted more than others. And there is sometimes in our, you know, circles, there is a discussion about what kind of skills, especially digital skills or services or tools, can you use to kind of then help mitigate some of the risks that come from climate change, especially when it comes to the, you know, the more kind of vulnerable groups in our society. So that's something that's, you know, we've been putting a lot of kind of attention to. And also, yeah, related to Beth's comment on this kind of human-centered design, I think that's you know, something that we've kind of been employing a lot in our projects. And also the aspect of co-design. So, you know, as a public servant, you know, designing all these projects, or when you try to refine the services that you provide as a government, you want to bring you know, the user of the services into the design of aforementioned services, right? And, you know, we have tools such as kind of citizen engagement and, you know, working with civil society as well, to kind of bringing those experiences and make them part of the co-design process.
Yeah. Okay. And Nemanja, I often thought of you as a future diplomat, and I'm curious to know whether, in fact, you're a diplomat working in your current position. But aside from that, I mean, do you think of yourself as a classic public servant? You know, public servant for me is the guy at the tax office, and I've got to go pay my car registration, and I got to wait online and then elbow the person next to me to be served next, and not be afraid to raise my voice. And Effie Stefopoulou, if you were still in the panel, might take me to task, because there are certainly quite talented people there. But the average public servant or civil servant, do you look at yourself that way? Is your job one of these sexless, you know, positions that you read about in the Charles Dickens novel, or are you on the cusp of something new, the cutting edge? Are you this avatar of the 21st century?
Yeah, no, I mean, apart from being based in London, I don't think the Dickensian, you know, context applies that much, fortunately. But yeah, no, it's an interesting question. I think there's you know, really a lot of opportunities in a lot of the global organizations, which the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development is a part of, and you know, this is sort of only kind of the finance side of it. Obviously, you know, you have the huge UN system, you have many other organizations, obviously in Europe, that do a really very interesting work, I think, and you know, maybe sort of also kind of going back to my previous answer, kind of about finding what really motivates you, what is kind of that niche area that, you know, you can find yourself in. I think there's really plenty of interesting areas and work that's being done that's needed, you know, where kind of young, motivated, energetic people are needed. And I think maybe again, sort of thinking about, you know, kind of specifically the skills and the arrangements, the work culture that's needed, and all of that. I think, you know, there's really a large role kind of for both sides, I would say, both for these organizations as employers, but also the role for kind of young people to really to try to push, let's say, to have these like quality aspects of, you know, of the work, of, you know, to sort of not see it only as a job. And again, I think I have a sense that, you know, let's say generations that are older than mine and Miles and Marinella's, right? Or even our generations themselves. I think there's a lot of kind of criticism of younger people, you know, people who are just getting to university or just graduating, sort of, you know, that they're kind of sensitive, I don't know, uninterested, you know, they need to be kind of given everything ready, etc. And I would really kind of disagree with that. I think, you know, thinking about sort of these new hybrid working regimes that we all suddenly have to get used to, I would say that my younger colleagues or youngest colleagues are the ones who, you know, kind of adapted most quickly, right? They understood what these sort of flexible working arrangements mean. Okay. They can sort of, you know, make the most of it, right? But I think that's what sort of, in terms of, you know, thinking what the employers need to offer them, it's also really important. And, you know, kind of both the employees need to demand that, but both also organizations have the responsibility to kind of deliver that, right? So, you know, thinking about long-term contracts and proper healthcare kind of benefits, pay transparency, all of these other issues.
Things that you didn't worry about when you were an undergraduate.
Yes, yes. But so this is, I mean, to me, again, this is, you know, if we think about kind of the employment trends, you know, all of this informal sector that exists and that developed maybe in the past 10 years, you know, it's something that needs to be probably looked at more in detail and kind of fixed. And I think, especially again, in when you look at international organizations and the like, you know, this is where this change really needs to kind of probably come first, and you know, that sense of kind of having a quality job needs to be available, let's say, and then you'll have people who can, you know, address that call, sort of really find themselves in the mission, really, you know, be energetic and push for those goals that, you know, organizations like the EBRD works on, or the World Bank, or the European Union, and so on.
Right. Okay. Marinella, I wanted to say, because I neglected to mention this when you first came on, that you have a postgraduate certificate in public administration and a Master of Science also in public administration from Leiden University. And like your fellow panelists, you studied international relations at ACT. Do you ever imagine that you'd end up where you are now? And we were listening to Beth, and as the youngest of the panelists here, you know, did you find that there's some sex appeal to working in public administration? Is that something that the senior public administration people like Beth Novak, and especially maybe Effie Stefopoulou working in the ministry, need to focus on ways to make positions like the one you occupy more attractive, or was it an easy fit for you?
Yes, you can hear me now, I think. Yes, so when I graduated from ACT, I went to the Netherlands, and initially I did, I worked at an NGO for 1 year, and then I did my master's degree in public administration and economics in Leiden University in The Hague. So for me, and then afterwards I worked for a little time in a private company. So at this moment I have worked in all three sectors, let's say, in an NGO, in a public administration, and in a private sector as well. So I have experienced a bit the idea and the environment of working in these fields. So for me, it was a conscious choice to end up in public administration because I really like rules, I think. So for me, I like, of course, I like the openness of the NGO and civil society and everything. But at the same time, I'm that sort of person that I really like also the regulations and everything. So I really started this with a lot of passion. And when I applied first for a traineeship at the European Parliament, the so-called Schuman traineeships, I was happy to get in, and then I was offered a job. So I'm a contract agent at the moment. But a lot of others, senior colleagues, they are most of the times permanent employees. So this is a thing as well, because nowadays the young people are mostly under temporary contracts. And whereas in the past, it was much easier to be a permanent civil servant. And that is the thing, maybe why it's not so attractive, or because the competition sometimes scares you. Because if we see there is so much competition to work at the EU institutions for several positions, even for the traineeship and everything. So a lot of people are scared to go through all this process. I also had to give exams to enter. It's not easy at all. You have to do certain preparation. But of course, it's a matter of timing as well. It's a matter of qualifications and desire. And yes, you have to try hard. That's a thing. So for me, yes, it's indeed one of the things I was aiming at, to work in the public sector. But I see certain challenges here as well. The ones have been mentioned, I see also in the article. Like the workforce divide. So for us in the administration, we are divided in units, several units, and everyone is specialized in something in particular. But sometimes you have not really idea what the other units are doing, because it's such a huge and complex organization. But there are certain projects going on towards that, like job shadowing. So you can be you can enter someone's job field for some time to experience a bit working like the others in that environment. That is very interesting. You can work in another team for a time, for some time. Or also the problem that I see is how to bring in innovation, because innovation is one of the criteria. Now we are going through the staff assessment reports. Because I work for the director, and we also deal a lot with staff assessment. And one of the criteria in staff assessment is also being innovative. And it's very tricky how to be innovative in the civil service, because you cannot bring in new ideas so easily. The process for them to be accepted, it's long, and yes, people are discouraged to do. But what I see in those 2 years I'm in here is that we've started going through this direction. So we have all sorts of new ideas. For example, in my team, in my unit, we have the ideas box. It's called like that, and it's just an online, it's an online space when we propose new things to go on, and of course they pass through certain accepting steps. But it's good. We are trying also towards innovation. It's not easy, but yes, for me it's good that I have had this experience of the not public sector, but from the NGO sector, and bringing here some sort of flexibility as well.
What we call cross-fertilization, back and forth a little bit.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the case.
Can I just jump on that as well, real quick?
Why not, Ermal, please?
Yes, I mean, because those 2 points are very important, right? So the collaboration with the public sector, the public sector is famous for this, units and departments working in silos, being territorial. And I think technology is kind of breaking that, because we can recall a few projects in a few countries that we work on where we developed, the intranets, this kind of collaborative platforms that in a way kind of force you, like, through this channels of transparency and accountability, it forces teams to work across, right? And, you can run any numbers, the more collaboration there is, the more the more new ideas come in, the more efficient you can be by using, like I'm talking about as well, like my own organization and how much that is fostered. That, we're always really encouraged to kind of reach out to new environment, to new departments, in order to kind of seek their ideas, and because sometimes, we can just are so focused in what we do that we may lose a different angle, a different perspective, right? And then the idea, this problem of innovation. Innovation was always at least seen as, either in the private sector realm or in the academic circles, on the labs, and what we've seen is, in a lot of, especially the more kind of advanced kind of the civil services or public administrations, we've seen efforts now to introduce innovation labs, smart labs, like incubators of sorts, where they are able to, just have some free thinking. And I think that is kind of helping to break a little bit of the, that image, that stereotypical idea that the public sector has of being cold and being slow and
old and fat. You're not looking old, and you're certainly not fat there, Miles. Okay, I tell you what, we're going to do a little round robin here. And I see that Effie Stefopoulou is still in the studio, and perhaps she'd submit to coming and offering her thoughts, having listened to your panel. So I have 3 rounds of questions, and you can just, answer them as they come to your head. One course you wish you would have been able to take at ACT, but wasn't offered, and one course you would want to teach here. Anyone want to take that? A course you wish you had the opportunity to take, given what you're doing now or what you've experienced elsewhere, and a course that you are going to come and teach because, well, it needs to be done.
What I can think of, and I think I've probably had this conversation with Nemanja at some point when we had the same path. So I think when I was in grad school, or even when at the World Bank, you worked there for a bit, Nemanja, as well. I think we had this conversation about, I wish we had, not just for ACT, but even at Johns Hopkins, that we had done a little bit more quant training, right? Being, just being a bit more have taken a little bit more kind of advanced statistics or econometrics. I know at ACT we probably took 1 or 2 stat classes, but I think no matter what you do, I think it's important to have those quantitative skills in your back pocket, because they always come in handy. And it's not always about just using them, in your own work, but even just it helps you to understand, right? The same thing with data. You don't have to be, a data scientist, but I think having that kind of training, it will allow you to, be better at understanding them, right? And then you'll hire someone junior to run your data for you.
Ermal, are you applying to teach a summer class now?
No, well, I was going to say something. I think if I were to do that, I think I would definitely. I'm very passionate about this e-services, and we call it GovTech, kind of whole of government sort of approach to transforming the public sector. I definitely see it as the future. I've seen it with my own eyes. How investments in technology, in systems and hardware, but also just investing in people and their skills. In terms of digital skills, will probably, will transform the public sector. And we saw that, advancing super fast, when we couldn't go to an office, right? In the past 2 years. I think if we were to have the conversation, it would be around that, because, it's just moving so fast, and just the efficiencies that you get out of the services, the efficiencies that you get out of even the taxpayer money, right? The faster you get a service, the easier you get it. It reduces corruption.
Do you have never dealt with the IRS in Washington, D.C.? If you want to talk about speed, I think they're still in the Stone Age, but okay, that'll be another topic. And Nemanja, Marinella, a class you wish you had taken, or a class that you'd like to teach?
Marinella, do you want to go first, or I'm happy to go as well?
Okay, thanks. I also agree a lot with Ermal on this, because econometrics was a class that I took in the master's degree, but not at ACT. So a way to measure policy effects is by conducting, of course, statistical and, yes, evidence-based, like policy making, as we say, quantitative measures. And nowadays we also use it a lot here, because we try to quantify everything: efficiency, client satisfaction. Yes, this is the way to go. We have a lot of surveys also going on to see if people are happy with the services. So in order to be able to measure this, the quality of our services, the effects of our policies, or everything, we need statistics. And it's not easy in the public sector to make statistics, because not everything is quantifiable by numbers. Yes, so this is a good combination of having the qualitative approach, also what we did at ACT a lot, comparative approach as well, culturally wise, or like in different ways. So for me, yes, I'm really into that, because I like the scientific approach of public administration, like an architecture. So I would love to do something with econometrics, let's say.
Okay.
Yes, I would be happy to do that if there is any opportunity. Yes.
All right, there you are. So there's going to be a little bit of competition between you and Ermal. And for some reason, I don't see Nemanja as a statistics guy. So let's see, a class you wish you had taken, or a class you would want to teach, given what you know now.
Yeah. No, I'm going to be very impractical here, and I'm actually super happy that both Ermal and Marinella were sort of kind of specific. I absolutely sign off on this. I think these are super important kind of topics, skills to have. It would be great for ACT students to have them, but especially kind of remembering on my days from ACT. I really loved all the history classes we did, and it dropped off a bit, I think, Dr. Wisner. So plenty that I could sort of, that I would want to teach. Okay. I think, there could be much more in terms of sort of American history and American studies at ACT that I would be really, really, enjoying it. And then, yes, I think, I continued sort of on that strain. I continue reading a lot of the history kind of communism in our region, sort of the implications so I really love all of that stuff. I'm still kind of in it, and obviously not sure there's going to be interest for that class, but that's a different topic. No, but I mean, to maybe tie it in a little bit to our previous conversation as well. Yeah. I think it's also important, we talk about sort of these very practical skills and things we must learn and we must have, and, kind of the 10 things you need when you leave university and so on. I think another thing is, it's quite important to also think about sort of the hobbies that you have, the things that you're passionate about, the things that you really love doing. It can help in so many ways. It can, it can lead to kind of, to push your career in a certain direction. It can be an outlet and something that, you kind of really enjoy when you come back from work or whatever. And that's really important. And this whole sort of mental health side of things, and, with COVID and everything, again, we didn't even touch on that, but I think, again, very, very important. But also, again, not to sound super kind of millennial about it, but I have sort of people who studied with me at SAIS, grad school. They worked, different jobs for 3 years, and then went on to be yoga teachers, or like a horse instructor. Like literally, I have a colleague who, that was her passion, and then she sort of decided, I'm not going to do anything else. I love horses. This is my life. This is what I wanted to be. So I think let's not forget that side of things as well. I know it's a bit of a cop out. Sorry, but
well, the human side of things. Okay, yeah. Now stay there, Nemanja, and then I'll ask Effie if she wants to add a few things here. A pitch. You're recruiting young people to come and work at the bank. Your one-liner. why am I going to go and work with you at the European, what do we call it, Bank for Reconstruction and Development, and not with Ermal Vila in Washington, D.C., at the World Bank? Got to stroke the beard a little bit.
Sorry, was it a question for me? Or?
No, I want you to I want you to give me a pitch. In other words, Beth was saying we got to do something to appeal to a younger cohort, if not a younger generation, potential colleagues in the public sector. So how are you going to make the pitch for your bank?
Okay. Oh, I hope nobody from my bank is actually listening in on this then, because yes, definitely not my role. But yes, I mean, I would emphasize again the sort of the mission that we have to support the countries where we work, and then really the many possibilities to work in different sectors on different typology of problems with different types of stakeholders. We kind of focused on the public sector here, but we work with private companies, which is a whole different, let's say, my team at least works with only private companies, and that's a whole different kind of ball game. Okay. Working across different cultures, languages, meeting people.
I'm going to cut you off. That's a long pitch.
Sorry. Okay. It was 30-second elevator. Okay.
It's sort of like the long papers you used to write. Ermal, give me a pitch. Why am I going to come and work with you at the World Bank?
Well, if you want to get kind of a global perspective on development challenges, I think this is a place to be. It is the largest development organization in the world. It has a footprint basically everywhere in the world. And, again, going back to our mission, which is, eradicating poverty and boosting shared prosperity. And if you want to feel like you want to be part of something larger, and also tackle the coming challenges of the 21st century, not just poverty, but climate change, and so that'll be my pitch.
That's very good, and I can see Nemanja, the wheels are turning. Maybe I got to get out of here. I got to go work with them. Marinella, because you're passionate about what you're doing, you've already told us. But why am I going to come and work as a management assistant in the European Parliament?
Because you feel that you're contributing a lot to the policy making, and it's so important, affecting everyone's life, the lawmaking process. So there are decisions ongoing every day, and we are at the heart of Europe. We meet people from the 27 member states and the different cultures and environment. And for me, it's so challenging because of the topics we are dealing with. So I work for the director, and we have 5 units working below us, below the directorate. So public procurement field, human resources field, we have the funding of political groups. So there is a lot ongoing there. I think it's super interesting because we work with so many different fields, and you get to apply a lot of skills, but learn new skills as well, from anything legal, also skills, which is not easy. You have to study a lot on that. But yes, it's very interesting, I think.
Yeah, and very long. Okay, so the Army had a pitch. It's not just a job. No, be all you can be. And I guess it was the Navy. It's not just a job. It's an adventure. And then it was the Marines who were looking for a few good men. Maybe you needed to take a course in pitch making. And I suppose if you're working professionally, that would be part of it. So I have Effie, and if you just want to raise your hand, Effie, you wouldn't mind coming back in the studio and share some of your reflections, having listened to these brilliant young people who all have gone on to make something wonderful of their lives and their careers. What are your initial thoughts as you listen?
I see enthusiasm, and that's the motivator behind everything. And whenever and wherever there is enthusiasm, the work and the outcome is going to be good. It's going to be not just fine. It's going to be top quality. And I think that keep learning and keep exposing ourselves to new things, that may be learning econometrics or data analytics, or that may be learning horse riding. And I like very much the idea Nemanja said about sharing experiences with our colleagues and sharing what our passions are, what makes us passionate about things we like in life, is broadening our horizons, that eventually brings back quality input and added value to the job we do. We are not machines, we are people. And as long we enrich our experiences, we enrich the quality of the work we do. And that's something I think that the public sector has undervalued up to now. The private sector was pioneering on this idea, but I think we are now on a good path, and we have to stay put on it and keep giving value to what makes people passionate about their lives and incorporate it into our jobs.
Excellent. Well, that's quite good. And you remind me we're not robots here at ACT either. But I wonder, maybe Marianela sometimes wishes that the politicians in the European Parliament were robots and they would just do their job and leave everyone else alone. I don't know. So I can't let you go without answering this question. Because all three of you had some involvement with one or another of the projects and activities we undertook at ACT at the Dukakis Center. And so now you are public servants, in a manner of speaking. You know, I asked the question of our previous panel, Evi Stefopoulou and Beth Novak. What we mean by public service at the Dukakis Center is really just a little bit different. We're thinking about the contributions made to the well-being of fellow citizens by private citizens, by private persons. And there was a time in the United States where there was no professional public service or civil service, but there was a very strong ethos of public service of this other sort. So public service. Can you tell me what public service is in one sentence?
You're asking who?
No, Marianela? Ermal? Marianela.
Marianela,
I
please.
think it's just, can I be just spontaneous? I think it's just trying to do good without expecting much in return. That's what came to mind.
Excellent, excellent. I couldn't say it better. Should we just leave it at that, folks?
Yeah.
Okay. Can I tell you how heartwarming it is, first of all, to read in the various social media of your individual exploits, both personal and professional. And it's something to think. In some instances, if I'm not mistaken, Ermal, you are the first of your family to take a higher education, and how far you've gone with yourself, and it's really of your own doing. We were just there to, you could take advantage of what we had to offer, and you took off. And I just want to salute you all for that. That is a fundamental part of the mission of the school. And any school should really be concerned with the well-being of the young people who come our way. I want to applaud you for your courage to work in these different domains, which may have had little to do with your undergraduate education, and to live in foreign countries, and some of you have lived in several foreign countries. That's quite impressive. And now you have mastered English as a foreign language, and who knows what other languages you're speaking professionally. And it's just, it's something to see another generation of public servants, and you're going to make a difference, and the world will be a better place thanks to that. So I'm going to have you all exit the studio, and we'll prepare the studio. We're a little bit running early, which is surprising. Normally I can't stop talking. It's like to take one of my classes. But we'll take a brief pause, and then we'll bring in our two next panelists, Sotiris Themistocleus and Danai Tapakidou, who are waiting in the waiting room. And we'll talk a little bit about what these same questions mean to someone in civil society. So Thank you all. I hope to see you face to face and in person very soon.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Wisner.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Okay, in case you hadn't remembered, I'm David Wisner, the Executive Director of the Dukakis Center, and you're joining us today on the platform of Anik Nefsis Web TV. Thanks to the collaboration and great generosity of my dear friend Pantelis Savidis, the Dean of Political Journalists in Thessaloniki in northern Greece. And I want to thank him personally for his support of this idea of having English language programming on a monthly or a bi-monthly basis. And then because I had this idea we could do an event not on Zoom but on the web cast, and he was quite enthusiastic about it and really gave me great support. So we're just preparing for our next panel, and I want to explain one or two things about the Civil Society Forum. We hosted our first forum, not in Thessaloniki, but in Athens. It was a co-production of the Dukakis Center and Transparency International Greece. The president of whose board is a dear friend, Dr. Anna Damascu, whose day job is at the Black Sea Trade and Development Bank. She's a lawyer, and she's heavily involved in anti-corruption activity. And she led the board of Transparency International Greece, one of the really active civil society organizations in Greece for a number of years. We brought with us to speak in the keynote session Dr. James McGann, the founder and director of the Think Tanks and Civil Societies program at the University of Pennsylvania, and organized subsequently annual events in Thessaloniki, including a virtual event last year. And we were prepared to do so again in January, this past January, until about 2 months ago, we learned that Jim McGann passed away. It was thoroughly unexpected. No one wanted to pry and ask whether it was COVID or something else, but it's a shock felt throughout the community of think tanks and civil society with which Jim had such an important role, basically raising the status of think tanks in the world to important contributors to the making of policy, creating a sense of community which was rarely there before. And we're paying tribute to him in this event, but we'll also air the video of the lecture he gave in Athens in May 2019. We'll do a YouTube premiere after our session tomorrow. He was a fervent activist on behalf of a healthy democracy in the United States and worldwide, and thinking of think tanks as another sector, not merely as part of civil society, but as occupying a very unique place in the interstices of universities, of educational institutions, of the public sector, both domestic and international, and obviously civil society organizations like Greenpeace or Amnesty International or Transparency Greece, or some of the smaller local civil societies with which we work sometimes also at the Dukakis Center. The Dukakis Center thinks of itself a little bit as a think tank, a little bit as a civil society organization, as an educational unit at ACT, as a hub for discourse and debate. It's kind of hard to put one's finger on what we actually do, but we're part of all of that. And Jim's loss was really heartfelt, and it'll be something that'll be quite difficult to overcome. I don't think there's anyone in the think tank community today who could fill his shoes. So thank you for allowing me to say that. I want to say also at the at the end of our program this evening, this next panel, we are going to open formally a virtual exhibition of banners and posters that have been created by the marketing department at ACT and Anatolia College for events hosted and organized by the Dukakis Center since 2011. And this is an undertaking done by a current senior in computer science at ACT. Arsa Sota is her name. And we're going to invite the public to come and take a look at some of the posters, some of the artwork, and understand the raft of events that we've done over the past 10 years, the scope of some of the topics that we've been talking about, and so on and so forth. And these are activities that, who knows, perhaps some of the guests in the previous panel took part in as well. So there we are. Now we're about ready to start a discussion of skills and training in civil society. I'm going to mute the mic for just a moment as I bring in our panelists. And I just want to mention also that I have my communications intern here, a senior in the English department at ACT, Chrissy Kulmatoglu, whose name is, well, okay, it would require advanced Greek, I think, to be able to pronounce it correctly. But she's done all of the translations for us. She's done a lot of the communication work. She monitors the social media. And I just thought it would be important for me to signal her contribution as well. So I have here our, well, I don't want to say she's the dean of the group, let's put it that way, Danai Tabakidu, who graduated from ACT way back, right, at the dawn of the 21st century. I have you down at 2000, but something tells me it was 2001. Which of the two was it, Danai?
It's actually 2000, David.
There you are, 2000, and you have been in Brussels almost ever since. Now I understand you also spend a good bit of your time somewhere in Italy, if you told me this in the past. Okay, and then we have graduating from the class of 2008. Is that correct, Sotiris? Our first and last undergraduate student from the Republic of Cyprus. I don't think you're the only one, but the only one that I've ever met here at ACT. So now you're joining us from Nicosia, and you're the Director of Strategic Development at the Center for Social Innovation, just as Danai is a partner at Schumann Associates in Brussels. So I'd say, Sotiris, you're a classic civil society kind of guy. I'm thinking, Danai, you actually wear many hats in your job. You probably interact quite a bit with representatives of civil society, but you also have some engagement, if I'm not mistaken, with the different institutions throughout the European Union. And if I remember correctly, just after you had finished your second master's degree at the Catholic University of Leuven, you did a traineeship in the European Commission, and you were working on training and skills. I have in the back of my mind that was a project that you undertook way back when. You'll have to correct me if I'm wrong. You realize if I was teaching you that my memory could possibly be faulty, given all the hours I've logged in the classroom. But why don't you tell us a little bit about how you came to occupy the position you occupy now?
Yes, I will excuse you, David, because it was back then in 2000. So yes, I had my my pass through the European Commission, what it's called the trainship, a stage at the time. And at the time, I was at the pre-accession financial instruments unit. I was called DG Enlargement, so it doesn't exist with that name anymore. But what I did at the time was helping the candidate countries at the time, now full member states, to help the negotiation so that they become member states And before that, I worked with the Eurocitizen Action Service, ECAS, to develop a funding guide for NGOs in Europe. But that was a few years ago. I've been a partner with Schumann Associates for the last a bit more than 15 years now, which is a Brussels-based business advisory firm where we support our clients to navigate through the EU policy making and funding labyrinth. So what we do is to help them understand what are the different EU policies and develop solutions for them, help them to engage with the different EU institutions and eventually secure public sector funding. So yes, I've worn different hats throughout my career life, but I think the latest one I would say is the one from the private sector. We represent, of course, different range of clients, from governments and large multinational corporations to trade associations and NGOs. And we work in all major sectors, including digitalization, energy sustainability, skills. Definitely, we work with companies that are involved in the labor markets and talent management. So I think we are in a position where we understand the needs in terms of skills development from both sides, so from the public sector as well as the private sector. So we're a little bit enablers of this process.
I'm gonna unplug my mic here. So you're sitting on top of a lot of things. Is there a sector that you work with that seems to be at the forefront of efforts to train the employees in civil society or in the public sector in particular for the kinds of skills that they're going to need, as our previous speaker, Beth Novak, put it, for the 21st century? Thinking that the goal is to create the state for the 21st century. So as you scan the different types of organizations you work with, who is at the cutting edge, would you say? Danai.
Yeah, David, I think we need to differentiate between the hard skills and the soft skills. Both are needed. I would say in the hard skills domain, we are now witnessing a major shift into what the EU is calling the green and digital twin transition. Maybe you've heard the terminology such as the Green Deal, for example, which is the umbrella policy of the EU, which aims to have zero net CO2 emissions. So it's not just a policy that will have an impact on environment and energy, but it's a mind shift. So it's a change across the economy. And I would say that skills are at the heart of the recovery plan for Europe in the post-COVID context. And a number of important initiatives at the EU level have been planned to support this green and digital transition and to prepare the workforce with sector-specific skills for the green and digital economy. For example, the EU recently launched a Pact for Skills, which calls for concrete upskilling and reskilling actions to support this transition. And climate change has been widely recognized as a global issue, not just in the EU, but I think globally. And moving towards a greener economy will create new opportunities, clean and sustainable technologies, and investments which will require these new skills and jobs for the future. So all these policies require, a bit of a budget commitment from the governments and the public sector. So there are a number of EU programs and initiatives from the recovery plans in the member states to programs such as the European Social Fund, or the Erasmus program. I'm sure you've heard about it. And they have prioritized investing in people and their skills to upskill them and reskill them to enable this green and digital transition.
I got carried away here with the message. I apologize for that. Danai, you are in a consultancy, which is a kind of organization that we haven't talked about. Is are you facing, let's say, this stage of your career, are you facing the need to train anew? Is there an issue with regard to skills in your sector? Is it something we haven't yet mentioned in our previous panel? Is there really some part of this policy ecosystem that we haven't been able to put our finger on yet? Some kind of training that is sector specific for people in your position?
Well, it hasn't been specifically named, but I'm sure if I talk about it, people will jump on and say, yes, I mean, this is what we need or have already. I think one of the skills in demand in our sector is client empathy. So your ability to demonstrate that you understand what the client needs and how you can help solve an issue. And the key starting point here is good listening skills. Your ability to, first of all, listen carefully and attentively to the client's problem, how it's affecting them, and propose solutions. I can very easily draw the analogy with what Beth was talking about earlier about, the public sector, seeing them not as a client in a private sector mindset, but really understanding what are the citizens' needs. So in the same way, we can talk about client empathy across the board. It's a transversal skill, I would say. Another skill I would definitely, mention is problem solving. In the consulting business, we're, first and foremost that, we are hired to find solutions to problems. So strong problem solving skills and a can-do attitude is something that is really required. And you learn it, as you go along. And creative thinking, I would say, also goes hand in hand with problem solving, because often the solution is not in front of you, and you are required to think out of the box, to brainstorm and generate ideas. And in fact, I think David, problem solving is perhaps one of the most sought after skills, not just for our profession. There is this famous skyscraper interview question where employers ask potential candidates, how tall is the Empire State Building, or similar questions where you're not really supposed to know the answer. You're not tested about your knowledge. Unless, of course, you're applying for an architect job or, an engineering job. But really, the objective is to see your reaction to such a question, whether you have the ability to brainstorm, like problem solve, to think logically. How do you tackle an unknown problem, or how do you behave in a difficult situation? And most importantly, can you remain calm, positive and proactive with the can-do attitude?
Well, it sounds like you're almost having to reinvent the wheel. In other words, these are classic problems, and we've been talking about thinking outside the box and solving problems. And the number of times a colleague here at the college says we need a course in problem solving because it's a skill people need to have. You say, isn't it something we're doing? There's nothing new about it, but it may be that the kinds of problems you're having to solve are a little bit different. So let me use this as a cue to segue to Sotiri. Sotiri, who's joining us again from Nicosia, and I'm sorry that you were waiting for so long in the digital or virtual waiting room here. You are in a position where you direct strategic development. You'll have to explain what that means. I don't know. It's a mouthful, but your organization is interested in social innovation. So what is strategic development and what is social innovation?
Firstly, thank you, Dr. Wisner, for the invitation. I mean, it's always a pleasure to return back to ACT, even virtually, and get connected with other graduates, but also professors. And it's good to have in the same panel than I that we potentially maybe collaborate from let's come from a different directions, as Danai is on the consultancy and EU edge, and we are in the implementation edge of implementing European projects and bidding basically for EU funds through Erasmus, Horizon, and other opportunities. So in the Center for Social Innovation, I'm the Director of Strategic Development. Our purpose is to develop the organization as a central ingredient, let's say, of the Cyprus civil society to support marginalized groups, to collaborate with public services and other stakeholders to produce policies and initiatives that will improve the quality of life in the communities around us. Strategic development is the process of designing the next steps in gradual development of the organization, but also of the personnel within. We employ 45 people in different areas, in the areas of policymaking, education, environment, technology, business. And in this context, we try to develop holistic solutions to address social challenges. And this is exactly what is social innovation. Innovation is not to, innovation as a word is, and as a terminology, is not to reinvent the wheel, is not to, or not even to find something new, but is to use proven and practical solutions that have been implemented before in solving different problems in different contexts. For example, we currently develop a lot of online applications to support elders, especially to access public services. This is a social innovation because we are using technology to support a marginalized group to access a service that otherwise would not be possible to access.
Okay. So we heard something like this. I think from Beth Novak was mentioning a project like that. Yeah. Okay.
So also we develop a lot of pedagogical approaches and pedagogies in the wider community, including, for example, work-based learning, peer-to-peer support, role-playing, real-life examples. We use gamification in real context to also educate people. And taking from the nice approach in skills development, I think it's apparent by now that knowledge, hardcore knowledge, is not anymore the most important thing in education, but skills, development of skills is the most important pillar of knowledge, of education and training. Knowledge is accessible everywhere at any point through the internet. What is not accessible and what you have to be trained, have to learn through practical experiences is skills. As you said before, problem solving, team collaboration, communication, leadership, critical thinking. I mean, a set of skills that will allow you to adapt to a constantly evolving world. And this is the challenges that the Center for Social Innovation is trying to address. And we try to develop both services and products to address these challenges, especially for marginalized groups. And when I say marginalized groups, I mean youth, women, elders, people living in the rural areas, people with disabilities.
Okay. You know, when Beth Novak was here, she was, I quizzed her a little bit on this notion she has. It's come out in an article she published last year, which is excerpted from a larger book on the same question. You're interested in creating effective public officials. And that's what training is in the public sector. So what is training in civil society? I mean, what are you creating?
After all these years in this sector, what we try not to make is simple presentations or.
So you're not going to give me a 2-minute elevator pitch,
or a delivery of I don't know, of a workshop. It doesn't work anymore. It's not attractive anymore. It's boring. People evolve in the way they learn. People have access to information, to knowledge, self-paced learning. What we try to offer as a package of training in civil society is exactly what we said before. We try to provide real case learning, meaning we get some projects we run and some initiatives we run, and we put practitioners or pre-service social workers to work on some initiatives, and through this practical experience to gain the knowledge and the skills that they have to develop. But also training, it's something that happens every day. Learning happens every day. What I say to most of the people I interact in my professional environment is that your goal is to get somewhere and start working or start learning. Training is not one-off thing. It's not a thing that will happen in 2 days sessions, or not even in 4 years of university, or 1-2 years of master, or I don't know, 3 years of PhD. Learning is what happens every day in your life, and you have to be open to that. The best training is to volunteer. If you don't have a job, the best training is to get somewhere, start working, start interacting with the society and the market in general, and to build your capacity in order to evolve. From personal experience and through the ACT and Dr. Maria Kyriakidou, for example, I had the opportunity to be placed as a volunteer in a gender-based NGO in Cyprus in 2006, working there for 2 years as a volunteer and and later as an external expert. And I evolved from that in the civil society of Cyprus. So having this personal experience, I think the best way to do it is to be trained and to be developed as a professional, is to actually get into the profession you want to get in.
Okay. I want to turn back to Danai. Danai, you're international in an admirable sense. You're a Hellene. You've studied abroad. You've been exposed to some degree to American values here in Thessaloniki, but then you went abroad to do your postgraduate study. You worked in Brussels for many years, and I understand also that you kind of go back and forth between Italy and Belgium. Is it a universal model that we're talking about here? Or are you thinking, well, you know, the Greeks, they're sort of like this. They need to be handled in this way. They need these skills. But if you're in Germany, you know, they drink a lot of beer. So you got to make sure that you see what you follow what I mean? Are we looking at a one size fits all desideratum? Something we would like all of the professionals in the sectors you work with? Or are you dealing with this incredible diversity and accepting it for what it is and trying to fix what's wrong in each place you go?
That's very interesting, David. There are cultural nuances to different skills, to the different set of skills, and I think we need to develop a certain degree of accepting what are the differences, and especially for people like myself or Marilena previously, we work in an international environment, or our colleagues from the EBRD and the World Bank. We are exposed to different cultures and different languages, different nationalities. So we all bring this cultural package, with us. So that's really important. But just to bring it back to the the whole public sector discussion, I think it requires a mindset change when it comes to training and solving problems at that level, because the governments need to not just the governments, but any kind of sector, they need to acknowledge the fact that public servants too, just like any other profession, need to be trained and upskilled throughout their career in order to update and upgrade their skills and keep up with the future of work. Otherwise, the skills will become obsolete or out of date, or what we see sometimes is that there is this mismatch between the skills that you currently have and what is actually needed. Of course, it goes without saying that acknowledging that need means that you are prioritizing investing in people and their skills in your budget. So you're actually making a commitment to invest in people's education and training of the public servants, and provide them with the right set of skills that will eventually enable them to solve problems. Of course, you need to define what type of civil service you want, and what kind of skills are required for these public servants. Skills that are fit for purpose. Skills.
So that's what I was getting at. Okay.
Yeah, skills that are needed to better address emerging needs, such as what I mentioned earlier, the transition to the digital or green economy, or whatever a public sector needs to have. And I think there's not a cookie cutter solution for this, but what Beth mentioned earlier, I think I find it very interesting. This whole cross-fertilization and community learning from best practices and successful approaches from other governments, institutions, companies. What kind of training practices they have adopted to upskill their personnel, their learning practices. I think it's important that there is some kind of a stakeholder engagement, a dialogue and exchange to understand what is best, what are the best approaches, what are the early adopters. And maybe not copy paste the solution, but adapt it to the different needs. And there are changes in the world of work that are taking place everywhere, and they cannot be ignored. So there is a clear need to adapt and operate in a more agile, a more innovative way, as Sotiris mentioned earlier as well. So,
okay, listening to both of you and thinking about one round of questioning I did with Beth Novak and Effie Stefopoulou, it seems to me that there, maybe the university or a college like ACT is really a thing of the past. There isn't much room for us. You seem to be able to train and educate. That's what you're telling me, Sotiris, and maybe do the work that universities can't do because we're not focusing on the right sort of things. So if you're, this is a massive ecosystem I hear Vinay designing. And I'm wondering, what is the place of a college or a university? And it could be a Northeastern, or it could be Harvard. Beth is a graduate of Harvard. It could be the University of Athens, and then the National School of Public Administration in Athens. You know, where does tertiary or post-secondary education fit in all of this if you're the ones who are doing the main part of the training? So Thierry, you want to take a stab at that? I mean, are we really dinosaurs over here at ACT?
No, not really. Actually, looking back all these years in ACT, in my years in ACT, and later in masters and in the PhD, what is very, very important in a university is that you learn how to make a research, you learn how to run a project, you learn how to manage your time, stress, how to interact with people. So universities should act as an environment where people will feel safe and secure to learn and to interact in an educational way. I think this is the most important thing a university has to offer, and this is what I feel the university offered to me. Despite the fact that, fortunately, a lot of the things I learned in the university are still applicable now when I use them, many people don't necessarily follow their studies in their professional career, but definitely their studies help them to formulate a way of thinking that is very helpful in the modern market. And this is project management. Every single thing you do in the university, every small assignment, every small study, every big research is a project management task that you have to interact with your professors, your classmates, to make a research to identify resources, solutions, and deliver a tangible product, a tangible outcome of a certain quality. I think this was the most important thing that I gained personally from the university. And
so if you heard me speaking with Nemanja and Ermal a short while ago, I asked them what course they wish they had taken and what course they want to come and teach. So you want to come and teach a course in project management one summer at ACT. Is that what you're telling me? You're applying for a job.
I would love that, actually, because I think project management framework and project management skills, it's applicable in every context and every profession. Even in personal life, it's applicable.
Take out the garbage, in other words.
Yeah, so I definitely believe that the skills I gained from the university are very important, but also I learned how to search, how to find things, how to interact with people around me.
Okay. I'm thinking that we had our Tsikno Pempti lunch today, and my project, the project I had to manage, was to make the fire so we could barbecue the souvlakia, and I didn't burn anything, so I guess I was pretty successful there. Then let me ask you, because you are really a person who's fit, as is Sotiris, to come back one day and teach a course, maybe not at ACT, or maybe at ACT, maybe somewhere else. But what is the course you wish you had taken, and what is it that you're prepared to teach that no one else is teaching?
I will answer to that, David, but first I'd like to go back to what you asked Sotiris, because I'd like to comment on that as well. I think it's a great question.
Excellent.
Because here we are talking about skills in the public sector, in the civil society, or whatever, but I think the bottom line, the foundation is the education sector, schools and universities. That's where people nurture the raw material they have, the soft skills and the hard skills. And I think what we really need, or what the policymakers and the educational institutions, academic institutions need to do, is to better prepare the youngsters so that they are ready to go in the labor market. So there needs to be a smoother transition from the education to the labor market. I think that is still missing, and it's a discussion since forever, you know, since like I can remember, and we're still not there. I think
we were talking about it in 2000, and we were talking about it in 1980.
Yeah, and I think, you know, 20 years from now, we might still be here talking about that, maybe from a different perspective. The other thing, you know, I wanted to say, you know, it's a very timely question because just yesterday we helped submit a proposal for a consortium for a Digital Europe program project. So the Digital Europe program is a new EU program that does exactly that, supports digital skills in different sectors, including education. And what the EU is really now doing is to place a lot of focus in digital skills at the university. So they're working into developing cross masters program for digital skills across all disciplines. So, you know, it's not just that you've finished the architecture and you're ready. You need to have a certain set of skills to be competitive at a global scale. So, you know, these are the kind of things that we'd like to, you know, move on. In terms of what course I would have liked to see, like back in the zeros. You know, if I know today, if I had known then what I know now, it's like it's almost like a generation change, David. So it's a kind of a difficult one to answer, but I would definitely say, you know, digital skills is something that is really needed. But I would also, I think students need, you know, what I said earlier, this a bit more training and understanding of what the labor market needs out there. You know, we are being taught things at the theoretical level, and maybe sometimes what we're missing is maybe the practical experience. So a little bit more, you know, problem solving skills, creativity, communication. How do you, you know, present yourself or an idea? Entrepreneurship, you know, this is really, you know, entrepreneurship is not just about creating a business, but it's about having an idea and convincing others with your idea. So that could be social entrepreneurship, you know, it could be across the board. So, you know, this type of skills that people would need in the future.
Great, excellent. So you're ready for another career as an academician if you ever get tired there in Brussels. Look, I want to ask you the question I asked the others as a way of closing out our session here. We're actually moving very quickly, and I'm pleased that you are able to share what you know, and certainly things that I don't necessarily know. But I've been banging my head here in Greece for the longest time, since 2000. Since you graduated, you were here, I think, when Michael Dukakis gave his lecture, right? At Danai in 1999. There, that was your senior year. What is public service? Well, if you had listened to Effie Stefopoulou, you have a sense of what public service is. It's the thing that public administration people do. It's the thing that public servants or civil servants do. And I'd turn around, and I'm certain Michael Dukakis would turn around and say, what you are doing is a public service. That is to say, you are private individuals, and you're contributing something to the benefit of your fellow citizens without necessarily asking anything in return. In other words, if you run a program, Sotiri, in civil society, you know, you get your salary, and that's part of your job, but the passion you put into it and your care, the care with which you try to see to it that the outcomes are met, is something that's above and beyond what might be expected if you're simply doing a job. It's the, well, isn't it the stereotype of the public servants that we used to have, that the guy just sits at the desk stamping papers as they come in, and you know, not a very exciting job. And I don't know how many times I had to go to the aliens police in Paris one year to get my residence permit renewed. And one year I had everything, and they were going to throw me out simply because I had everything. You can imagine, well, that's a classic public servant. But you are, in a way, engaged in public service, or are you? Is that what you're doing? would you say that you are public service activists in a sense that Michael Dukakis and I might understand? So Thierry, I'll start with you.
Yeah. Okay. Public service has a specific connotation and terminology that is associated with the state and the government, at least in this part of the world. I don't know in other parts of the world, but in this part of the world, public service is public service. I mean, it's in the context we all know it's run by the state. Ideally, is for the common good, and also ideally is being paid by everybody through taxation. Okay. What we do, I want to believe that is a social contribution. Okay. It's a contribution to the society. It's as you said, it's a job, it's a profession, but this it has to be a profession in the sense that it has to be organized, it has to be within a specific plan, within a strategic development that will actually has a positive impact and be sustainable. It's not one-off. So it's not a social contribution of, I don't know, giving a blood or planting a tree once every year, but okay. It's an everyday process. It's an everyday contribution, an everyday job. Okay. But public service, again, I understand and I fully understand what Michael Dukakis means and what you, Dr. Wisner, mean, but still, I'm not very comfortable to connect public service with what we do, because it's especially, again, in the context of the Mediterranean basin countries.
Okay, you'll wait for the state to do everything for you.
Exactly. So I want to think of my job as a social contribution in a very, very, let's say, professional way and context.
Okay, and I presume ethical as well.
Exactly.
Okay, then are you some practitioner in a broader field of public service? And I'll read this again because I quite love it. It was, I hope I kept it open. I guess I didn't keep it open. It was a passage or a quote from Alexis de Tocqueville, who's writing in the 1850s, and he was rather astounded as he's traveling through the United States how readily Americans take care of themselves. This is, a public service or a civil service doesn't exist until the 1880s or 1890s. So you're talking about the founding decades, the formative decades in American history. Private citizens are taking care of themselves. And you read Thucydides, the famous funeral oration attributed to Pericles, and he says, well, we're minding our own business, but we have important contributions to make to the wheels of the state, the running of the state. There's a place for private citizens to be engaged also. Is that in any way what you're doing there at Schumann Associates, or are you, forgive me for saying it, you're in the corporate suite and you're an executive and you're running a business. You could be a lawyer. It's a corporate approach to doing the work you do.
David, even in the latter case, like the corporate or the C-suite, I think you always serve a public interest at the end of the day. Okay. But in terms of public service, if we use it in the strict sense of a public commodity, I would be more aligned with Sotiris. So, it's not that we are public servants. But if we flip the question and we articulate it in a different way, in the sense that what we're doing is, community, public life work in the wider sense of the term, then certainly yes, because even in the private sector, at least from our point of view, what we do is try to translate the EU policies into concrete actions for our clients, and we talk about public sector and taxpayers' money where they need to be adopted to implement different EU policies. So at the end of the day, yes, we're part of the whole value chain, and I think if we all see a little bit more carefully, regardless of our profession and our role in society, we all carry this with us. Whatever profession it is that we do, we enact a role that is connected to the society. So we're all part of this value chain, regardless if we're working for the public sector in the strict sense of the term, if we're in the academia, if we're in private sector. So we're all part of the same ecosystem, maybe with different rules and procedures, but at the end of the day, it's about serving the citizens.
All right. Listen, I floated an idea at Thessaloniki as the Boston of the Balkans. Do you guys miss Thessaloniki at all?
I do.
There you are. That's a fair response. So, Sotiris, you came as a guest, as a tourist, so to speak.
I was there a couple of months ago. But I miss it every month, so I wish I was there every month.
All right, excellent. Great. I'm so pleased to have had you with me today. I'm going to do something that I hadn't necessarily planned to do. I'm going to try to share a screen because, as I've announced a moment ago, we're about to launch or open formally an exhibition, virtual exhibition that was put together by a current senior in computer science, posters and banners of events we've done at the Dukakis Center the last decade. And I have the URL here. It's pretty long. I don't know how you're going to possibly remember all of that, but I'll share the screen and you can see what it looks like, all right? I should be able to share a screen. They let me do it. Share. And this is what it looks like. It's a virtual exhibition of banners and posters created for events organized and hosted by the Dukakis Center, the American College of Thessaloniki, from 2011 to 2021. And you're welcome to navigate on your own. You can see it's a big open space. And to check out some of the posters that we put together over the years. This is by and large the work of the marketing department at ACT and Anatolia College. And you would think, well, in a sense, they're doing this to support my work at the Dukakis Center. This was our first civil society forum, which we organized in Athens in May of 2019. And we were looking at the role of think tanks and civil society organizations as gatekeepers of democracy, to keep the politicians honest, so to speak, to engage in the kind of information sharing that Danai says she does at Schumann Associates. And so you could say all of this is a kind of an infrastructure of public service activity that we built up over the years at ACT. And you're welcome to come and check some of this out. It's just, to my mind, it exemplifies the kinds of skills that young people are going to need to teach themselves if they're not learning it in the classroom. Arsa said she never played around with any of this stuff, and she figured it out on her own, and has to think that it's partly because she's quite a bright young lady, but you have to think simultaneously that if nothing else, we're creating an environment where a person knows I got a problem, I can figure out how to solve it. I don't need to ask someone. I don't need the public service to come in and pick up my garbage if the bin outside is overflowing. So there it is. This is what I wanted to share with you. And I want to thank my guests once again, Danai Tapakidou and Sotiris Themistokleos. Sotiris has one of these mile-long, I'm certain it's a Welsh name, if it's not Cyprus Greek. Today is Tsiknopemti, so if you're going to go out and have a barbecue, unless you're a vegan or a vegetarian, Kalin Tsiknopemti. I made my barbecue, but I may go out again a little bit later. And you know, it's just we're imagining that COVID-19 is soon to be a thing of the past. We have other crises to worry about. This terrible war that our neighbor to the northeast wants to start. And then for me, the great problem of what is the fate of our democratic systems in the United States. We're being challenged as never before. And is there a role for civil society organizations, for innovative public sector professionals to help shore up the foundations of our democratic institutions? It's a question that I ask myself just about every day. So with that, we're going to thank our previous panelists, also Marinelle Tarapi and Nemanja Grgic, Ermal Vila. We had Beth Novak from Northeastern University, and Effie Stefopoulou joined us from Athens. This has been quite an international, a pan-European, if not global event. It's one of the great things about the lockdown. We've learned to communicate with one another. And there it is. That's what we've done. So thank you very much once again, and I hope to see you all soon.
Thank you, Doctor. Bye.
Thank you, David, for the invitation. Thank you, everyone.
I have a little music here. I just have to figure out how to play it. It'll come if I find the music. Well, we'll try to cut this out of the... Is this it? Well, I can't figure out how to do the music, so I'll just sign off. Thank you very much, everyone. It's been a long night. Time for a barbecue.
Bye, everyone. Pleasure. Bye-bye.